もそんなんじゃダメもうそんなんじゃほら心は進化するよもっともっと
Globalization has significantly impacted Japan, affecting every part of its economy and even social life. These include the flow of international finance, international trade, the way businesses operate, government policy, consumers, labor market, and the environment. More specifically, some drivers influenced Japan's economy, such as transnational corporations, government policies, trade liberalization, and technology. These drivers have had a positive impact on Japan. However, it also forces change which negatively impacts the Japanese way of life and economy. There are many social groups for whom globalization has brought positive changes. In particular, globalization has led to the changes in employment legislation for women in Japan. They were usually confined to routine jobs with little or no training and expected to leave upon marriage or childbirth. However, societal and demographic change, educational advance, and increased acceptance of ideology of equal labour rights have encouraged a gradual increase in women's determination to continue working. Another important effect of Japan's globalization has been the collapse of previously well-entrenched system of lifetime employment. The period of stagnant economic growth and faltering markets in the 1990s has forced reform of the Japanese labour model and the interrogation of American-style economic principles. This has led to less regulation, more privatization, and remuneration systems that are increasingly governed by merit rather than fairness. Further, the rise in Japan's economy has positively affected the nation. This is due to the advancement in technology which has allowed Japan to develop and manufacture modern equipment such as cars, household products, and video games. Advancements in modern transportation systems and internet has also enabled more visitors to experience the many sceneries Japan has to offer, leading to an increase in Japan's income through tourism. In the 1970s and the 1980s, Japan appeared poised to become the world's most dominant economy. But by the late 1980s, the country had slid into a prolonged crisis of deflation and economic stagnation that has continued into the 21st century. As globalization is an economic event driven by political considerations, the domestic economies of countries will be most affected. The worldwide increase in demand requires more production and export, thus making it difficult for some states to maintain their standard of living as they lack the resources to respond to the demand. Further, China has overtaken Japan as an economic power due to Japan lacking the human resources as a result of low birth rates. Overall, Japan has been a winner as a result of globalization as technology continues to enhance. Additionally, Japan largely exports products worldwide and will continue to do so, thus will benefit Japan's economy. Further, globalization has positively impacted social norms, particularly in women. This leads to increased productivity. Lastly, Japan's free trade promotes global economic growth, leading to an increase in jobs, makes companies competitive, lowers the price for consumers, and continues the spread of technology.
In the 16th century, Japan was considered rich in minerals and was a huge exporter of silver, copper, and gold. Due to its natural endowment of being a volcanic country, it became influential in the world economy. Unfortunately, the exports were later banned due to the VOC. Since then, Japan has grown to amaze other nations, including Europeans, with the quality of craftsmanship and metalsmithing, especially during the Nanban period. Continuing to the Edo period, Japan's economy gradually evolved and developed, such as the increased shipping of the commodities, expansion of domestic and foreign commerce, and diffusion of trade. Still in the Edo period, then the Christianization started to spread. Japan then isolated themselves from the outside world to eradicate from getting the influence called the Sakoku. During the Sakoku, they studied Western science and technique. Then comes the Meiji Restoration in 1868, the most crucial period for the Japanese. It was when the transition economy happens where they change from feudal system to free market. and they started to open up to the outside world. Both economic development and human development rapidly increased in this period. The abolition of feudal made it possible for people to choose their own occupation. In order to even more encourage industrialization, the government introduced national educational system and constitution. They started gaining respect from Western countries before previously shutting themselves out. Post-war period, economic growth skyrocketed. It was extremely large, making Japan a high-wage country just in a couple of decades. We could see from the economic history that the level of economic development in Japan happened because of the innovation and entrepreneurship and education. Statistically speaking, according to gross nation income, nominally, Japan ranked third with a GNI of 5,693 billion and ranked fourth with a GNI per capita PPP of 45,000. The human development is measured through HDI, which is an index focusing on three basic dimensions of human development, which are the ability to lead a long and healthy life, the ability to acquire knowledge, and the ability to achieve a decent standard of living. Over the years, the number of life expectancy keep on increasing and recently hit a new record, averaging 81.25 years for men and 87.32 years for women in 2018. The reason behind this is because Japan has advanced in treating disease along with the public's rising health awareness that also have contributed to the population ever-lengthening lifespan. For centuries, Japan has always focused on the education system, even ever since the 6th century, where initially Chinese teachings and ideas flows to Japan. The education in Japan is one of the biggest reasons why Japan is the most advanced in technology worldwide. According to the United Nations Development Program, Japan's GNI per capita increased about 26.5% between 1990 and 2017. Overall, Japan has an increasing number of HDI since 1990, with HDI value and rank Japan's HDI value for 2017 is 0.909, which puts the country in a very high human development, positioning 19 out of 189 countries. With all the analysis assessed based on economic development and human development, it is more likely for the human development to have greater significance for an Australian firm considering establishing a presence in that country. Aside from knowing the financial ability of the Japanese people on purchasing product, it is possible to know the demand of the market based on their education and their life expectancy.
Cultural aspects in terms of common values shared by a nation can be important to consider when assessing whether two countries can be successful business partners. In this case, we will be considering the cultural distance between Australia and Japan using Hofstede's cultural dimensions as well as other factors such as language and level of education. So firstly, if we look at language, Japanese, as we know, is the language of Japan, and it is a very high context language where cultural clues and the setting of discussion play an important role on top of the words that are spoken. Japanese people value their traditions and rituals, and this also extends to business settings where tea ceremonies are held before meetings to expose ritualistic parts of the Japanese culture to overseas business partners. It is also important to notice that there is a level of language that is spoken depending on if the individual is a superior, an equal, or someone who is below the individual's status, for instance, disrespectful to address a superior in a familiar manner. These factors must be considered when initiating cross-cultural communication with the Japanese, as just being able to speak the language will not be enough to increase business success with the locals. Australians, however, are low context when it comes to language, and this is the difference that builds some distance between the two cultures. So, moving on to levels of education, with Japan being a key player in the technology, other fields with high value-added products, it is no surprise that the Japanese people are more advanced compared to most other countries, including Australia. As receiving an education is compulsory and there is a common expectation for students to achieve good results, the Japanese are highly educated. This means that businesses who wish to export goods to such a country will have to ensure these items are of very high quality, as the Japanese are educated enough to make well-informed purchase decisions. Next, we can look at Hofstede's cultural dimensions to further assess the gap between Japan and Australia. Factor 1. Power distance. Japan seems to be a country with a strict hierarchy, indicating that there is a clear power distance between the classes of people. Further evidence of this is, as mentioned above, the levels of language used, depending on level of superiority. In Australia, however, communication is more informal and organizations are less likely to strictly follow an organizational hierarchy. So factor 2, uncertainty avoidance. According to HofstedeInsights.com, Japan scores very highly in this category as they are frequently affected by natural disasters such as earthquakes and volcano eruptions, and they have learned to prepare ahead for such uncertain situations. In a business setting, this would mean that managers require very detailed reports and thorough explanations before they are convinced into investing any projects. Australia, however, would not score highly in this factor, and this is another element that builds a gap between the two cultures. Factor 3. Individualism. Japan would score somewhat low in this category as individuals seem to be more collective as they are more likely to work towards a common goal. This is demonstrated by the highly loyal Japanese employees who stay within the same organization for a long period of time when compared to Australian workers who tend to change between jobs and corporations depending on their preference at the time. Factor 4. Masculinity. Both Australia and Japan would be considered masculine as they are driven by competition and success. However, the Japanese are considered one of the most masculine cultures as they very much thrive for perfection and excellence, and workaholism is a common concept. This makes it harder for females to climb up the corporate ladder and is a reason why there is a lack of female representation in higher levels of management when compared to Australia. Factor 5. Long-term or short-term orientation. Japan is a long-term oriented culture, and companies are usually more concerned about the long-term impacts of their actions instead of carrying out their businesses to make a short-term profit. Australians, however, are short-term oriented, meaning that they are less likely to save up for the future and more likely to focus on attaining rapid results. This is another significant factor that demonstrates the gap between the two cultures. So factor 6, we have lastly indulgence. Japan scores lowly on this aspect as they are less likely to put emphasis on leisure activities due to their workaholic nature. This therefore also means that Japanese people are more likely to stay within the norms and follow what is considered right by society. Australians, however, are the complete opposite and are much more willing to make decisions that will allow them to have fun and enjoy life. This also means that they are more optimistic and likely to make decisions based on impulse, unlike the Japanese. According to these factors, it is clear to see that there is a significant gap between the values and goals of each culture. Although Australia, as a multicultural country, values the different races and cultures, Japan, as a monocultural nation, is likely to protect the uniqueness of its culture, which it values so dearly. Even as Japan grows to be a more globally oriented society, it is safe to assume that they will continue to preserve their cultural roots, and therefore this gap between the two cultures is unlikely to reduce.
According to a theory from David Ricardo, a country should focus on the production of the goods which have comparative advantage and import goods which they produce less efficiently. As for Japan, they have an impressive automation plan that makes it easy to assemble complex technical components. Therefore, Japan has a strong comparative advantage in auto parts, and integrated circuits. Japan often exports some vehicles instead of selling them. Japan is the world's third largest auto parts exporter, exporting about 36 billion worth of auto parts every year. Integrated circuits are used in many places in Japan for computers and other electronic devices. Japan is the fifth largest exporter of integrated circuits in the world, with an annual export value about $12 billion. The top 10 most important export products in Japan are high-tech manufacturing. Cars and auto parts are the largest, accounting for about 20% of total exports. Japan has Toyota, Honda, Nissan, Mitsubishi. As you can see from the picture, Japan's largest major export share is currently automotive and auto parts. Japan should continue to focus on the technology of automotive automation production. Second, the Japanese government should continue to help support the development of foreign markets and continue to develop industries with comparative advantages. The third is the production management of Japanese auto companies. Producers strictly control the quality and the quantity of automobiles and auto parts, maximizing production efficiency. Moreover, electronic products are also important. There are many global electronics companies including Canon, Fuji, Hitachi, Nikon, Nintendo, Panasonic, Sharp, Seiko, Sony, Toshiba, and Yamaha. There are a lot of heavy industries such as chemistry, shipbuilding, and steel. Moreover, some industries are small and unique, such as Japanese manga and animation, which is more related to the Japanese culture. In general, Japan, as a geographically unique Asian country, has a comparative advantage in certain industries. According to David Ricardo, if Japan continues to concentrate on these industries, it can maximize the use of domestic resources to achieve the growth of the Japanese economy.
Australian Innovation System report suggests that Australia has a comparative advantage in agriculture, followed by aquaculture and coal mining. Although the mining boom had increased real household disposable income per capita by 13% in between 2003 and 2013, the mining sector is slowing down from supply exhaustion. For this reason, Australia has to direct their specialization on other high-potential industries to achieve comparative advantage. The industries that have been constantly growing are service and agriculture industries. Australia has always been known as a significant agricultural exporter, which includes wheat, fruits, nuts, and vegetables. Although they are still underperforming relative to Chile for fruits, the United States for nuts, and China for vegetables, Australia has an advantage in terms of supply of pasture and green cropland, production efficiency, and the quality of agricultural products. According to Sanderson and Ahmadi Esfahani, Australia has the highest excess of pasture and green cropland after taking consumption into consideration. There has also been an increase in structural investments for integrated pest management and drip irrigation systems, allowing expansions for the almond industry. Australia also utilized their land intensively, which resulted in low production costs, especially in grains production. Australian farmers are also increasing production in high-quality fresh produce to meet the domestic quality demand. With the constant improvements, Australia's fresh produce exports have increased for the past 6 years, as they are considered reliable for international markets. In the long term, Australia's competitiveness will predominantly driven by quality improvements and marketing effectiveness relative to its competitors. With excess supply and constant growth of real value global fresh produce imports by 5% per year in between 2010 and 2015, Australia may gain positive net export value in the agricultural industry. Australia should also specialize in service, in particular the health and medical tourism industry. It is well established and has grown over the past 20 years, contributing 6.3% of Australia's GDP, where its exports were $29 million in 2013. There has also been a 14% annual growth in tourists visiting Australia for medical reasons in between 2005 and 2010. These growths are mainly caused by a worldwide increase in life expectancy and population aging. Australia's demographic forecast shows that the proportion of Australians aged over 65 will experience a rapid increase from 8.3% to 22.7% by 2050. As older people are becoming a significant contributor in the market, there is a realistic possibility that worldwide demand for health products and aged care will increase, providing opportunities for Australia's health sector to trade with other countries. With a comparative advantage in the quality of Australia's healthcare system and its safety, specializing in these industries will benefit Australia in the long term. Globalization has positively influenced Japan's economic growth due to the advancements in technology and modern transportation systems, which may continue to benefit the economy in the long term. Japan's growth may act as an incentive for Australian firms to expand into the country. To establish their presence and decide on how to successfully expand into Japan, most Australian firms took account of the country's human development, such as the locals' income, education, and health information. However, our research suggests that the expansion might not be successful. According to factors such as language, level of education, and Hofstede's 6 dimensions, it is evident that there are major differences between the Japanese and Australian cultures. Furthermore, Australia has an advantage in the agriculture and service industry, while Japan has an advantage in the automotive industry. While both countries specialize in different industries, the trade between these countries will have little success. However, agriculture and service industry largely focuses on natural and human resources, in which Japan lacks in these areas. With these differences and the low possibility that the two countries will grow similar in the future, the expansion of Australian firms into Japan will most likely be unsuccessful.